On November 10, 1955, the crew of a passing vessel came across a ship adrift 600 miles off its course in the Pacific, listing hard, half underwater, and by every reasonable measure, days overdue to sink. It hadn't. The radio was still tuned to the distress channel. The clocks on board had stopped at 25 past 10. And of the 25 people who had left port 5 weeks earlier, not one was aboard, and none of them were ever found. For 70 years, this has been told as a ghost story. The inquiry that followed found something colder, a slow, understood mechanical failure, and one human decision made in the dark that no one ever returned to explain. Welcome to Ash and Alibi, the cases that were never closed. MV Joyita was not built to haunt anyone. She was a 69-foot wooden motor vessel, built in 1931 at the Wilmington Boat Works in Los Angeles as a private yacht for the film director Roland West, and named for his wife, the actress Jewel Carmen. Joyita, Little Jewel. She served the U.S. Navy in the Second World War, ran aground in 1943, and was patched up with galvanized iron plumbing that would matter far more than anyone realized. In 1948, her holds were lined with cork, about 640 cubic feet of it, making her, by any practical measure, virtually unsinkable. That single fact is the whole reason this case stays open. By 1955, the Joyita belonged to Dr. Catherine Luomala and was chartered to Captain Thomas Dusty Miller, a British-born copra trader living in Samoa. At 5 in the morning on October 3rd, she left Apia for the Tokelau Islands, a familiar run of about 270 miles. She was already a day late leaving. Her port engine's clutch had failed, so she sailed on one engine instead of two. Aboard were 25 people, 16 crew and 9 passengers, including a government official, a surgeon, Dr. Alfred Parsons, traveling to perform an amputation, a copra buyer, and 2 children. In her hold, medical supplies, timber, foodstuffs, and 80 empty fuel drums. That route to Tokelau was one Miller had sailed before, a short, familiar hop, north across open water, but running on a single engine, with a clutch not fully repaired, working backward from the fuel she carried. Investigators later placed her roughly 240 miles along it, within about 50 miles of Tokelau, when whatever happened aboard the Joyita began. Not a log position, a reconstruction from what fuel she should have had left. She was due at Tokelau on October 5th, reported overdue the next day. No distress call was ever received. Royal New Zealand Air Force flying boats searched some 100,000 square miles of open Pacific from October 6th to 12th, and found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick. No sign she had gone down at all, because she hadn't. 5 weeks later, on November 10th, Captain Gerald Douglas of the Tuvalu found her adrift roughly 600 miles west of her plotted course, north of Vanuatu, near Fiji, almost the opposite direction from everywhere the search had looked. She was partially submerged, listing hard. No one was aboard. Some 4 tons of her cargo was simply gone. If a find this strange is new to you, that's worth a like right there. Because the ship that looked doomed to the ocean floor was still afloat, 5 weeks later, with no one left to explain why. One dinghy and all 3 of her life rafts were missing, and there hadn't been enough life jackets aboard to begin with. Her radio was tuned to 2182 kHz, the marine distress frequency, but a break in the aerial cable, painted over and hidden, had cut her range to about 2 miles. Her clocks had stopped at 10:25. Her cabin and navigation lights were still switched on. The logbook, the sextant, the chronometer, and Miller's own firearms were all gone. And on the deck sat the ship's doctor's bag, a stethoscope, a scalpel, and 4 bandages, stained, unexplained, and left without a settled meaning in the inquiry record. The 1956 inquiry at Apia reconstructed what the ship's own machinery could prove. A cooling water pipe on the port auxiliary engine had corroded, worn through by galvanic reaction with wartime galvanized fittings, and it failed. Seawater began filling the bilges. The bilge pumps had no strainers, and they clogged. There were no watertight bulkheads to hold the flooding back. Running already on one engine, she lost steering, swung beam onto the swell, and took the heavy list she'd later be found with. It happened at night, lights on, clock stopped near 10:30, which means whatever came next came in darkness, with hours of night still ahead. Here is what the inquiry never explained. The cork lining held. The empty fuel drums in her hold kept her afloat. By every measure investigators could test, this ship could not have sunk, and 25 people left her anyway. The strongest reading, argued but never proven, is that the leak stayed invisible until seawater was already over the engine room floor, in darkness, with a radio that could reach only about 2 miles, not home. Some point to Captain Miller. Possibly injured, possibly overboard, the stained bandages left behind, and a rumoured falling out with his first mate, Chuck Simpson. That's one hypothesis among several never established as fact. What the evidence leaves us with is a decision that may have been made in panic, by people with no reason left to trust the hull beneath them. The decades since have offered louder answers. That a Japanese fishing fleet, or wartime holdouts still hiding in the Pacific, took her people. That it was mutiny or piracy. That someone staged the whole disappearance for the insurance money. That the Pacific holds its own Devil's Sea, and the Joyita simply crossed into it. None has evidence strong enough to outrun the mechanical record. No confirmed fleet was placed at the scene. No record turns mutiny, piracy, or insurance fraud from possibility into proof. No bodies ever surfaced. And the paranormal explains nothing that a corroded pipe doesn't already explain better. They aren't disproven so much as unnecessary. Theories built for a case that had already answered half of itself. If you want more files like this one, cases where the physical evidence tells one story and the folklore tells another, that's what this channel does. Subscribing means the next one finds you. Because what's left of the Joyita story was never a haunting. It's a chain of ordinary failures, followed by one night no one returned to describe. The mechanical half of this case was settled by the 1956 inquiry, and settled plainly. A corroded pipe, clogged pumps, a hull with no bulkheads, running on one engine, losing steering, and falling beam onto the swell. What's never been settled is the human half. The decision, in the dark, to leave a boat that would not sink. That's not a gap, because no one looked hard enough. It's a gap because the only witnesses left the ship that night, and not one of them ever came back to explain it. Robin Morm later bought the wreck and gave the case its lasting name in his own book, The Joyita Mystery, and for 70 years the name has pulled toward ghosts. This was never a ghost story. It was a boat that could not sink, and 25 people who, for one night in the dark, believed otherwise. If you want the next file, The Record Left Half Answered, subscribe and leave this one a like. On Ash and Alibi, the file stays open.